Okay, we've got a 4,500 kilogram helicopter accelerating upwards at an acceleration of 2.0 meters per second squared. What lift force is exerted by the air on the propellers? Now, Newton's second law says there's a net force in the direction of the acceleration, and we can calculate it by going ma. So if the helicopter is accelerating up, we know that the net force must be upwards. Now remember, the net force is the overall result of all the forces acting on that helicopter. So let's finish what we call a free body diagram and label what forces are actually acting on the helicopter. Well, we know there's gravity down, force of gravity straight down towards the center of the Earth, and there's some lift force from the rotors on the air propelling it upwards. And if it's accelerating upwards, we would expect the lift force to be bigger than the force of gravity. It's got to be winning. So when we set up our equation, Newton's second law says my net force, my overall unbalanced force, will simply be what's left over in my diagram. So lift minus gravity. When I simplify the picture, that's what we call the net force. So my net force we always defined as the sum of all the forces acting on the object. This little symbol here means sum of. It just keeps it easy rather than writing sum of every time. Now our lift force is in the direction of our net force, so we're going to call that positive. And our gravity is opposing it, so it's going to be negative. And those two forces, when we add them together, are going to give me my net force, which is up. Now we simply substitute. We're trying to find our lift force. Well, we know net force is ma. F net is always ma. We're trying to find F lift. And we're going to subtract off, adding a negative is the same as subtracting, force of gravity, which is just mg. So when we go through this, I've got my mass of the helicopter, 4,500. It's accelerating upwards with an acceleration of 2 meters per second squared. We're trying to find F lift, and mg will just be 4,500 times 9.8. Now, if we keep track of some of these numbers right on our diagram, it can help make sense of all this. 4,500 times 2 means my net force is 9,000 newtons upwards. So in other words, when these two things are subtracted from each other, they should equal 9,000 newtons. When I work out my force of gravity, when I go 4,500 times 9.8, I get 44,100 newtons. So it would make sense that my lift force is 44,100 plus 9,000 newtons, which is what is going to happen in our equation. So when we solve our equation, we get 9,000 newtons on the left equals F lift minus 44,100. Add a 44,100 to both sides, 100 to both sides, and I get 9,000 plus 44,100, which gives me 5.3 times 10 to the 4 newtons, which is my lift force.